We now move into the opposite side of agency disclosure, the unrepresented seller agreement. Up to this point, you have learned how Arizona licensees handle unrepresented buyers. This section addresses a situation that occurs frequently in today's market. A property owner attempts to sell their home without hiring a listing broker, yet a buyer represented by a licensed real estate agent wishes to purchase the property. This agreement protects the buyer's broker, clarifies agency relationships, and ensures compensation transparency while maintaining compliance with Arizona agency law. This is not a listing agreement. This is not seller representation. This is strictly a compensation and agency disclosure agreement. Understanding this distinction is critical for contract writing. Why the unrepresented seller agreement exists. Arizona law requires agency relationships to be clear at all times during a transaction. Under AAC R4281101, licensees must avoid conduct that creates confusion regarding representation. When a seller is unrepresented, there is no listing broker, no seller fiduciary representation exists. The buyer's broker still owes duties exclusively to the buyer. Without this agreement, compensation disputes and agency misunderstandings commonly arise. MESA. Example, A for sale by owner. FSBO seller accepts an offer written by a buyer's agent, but later refuses to pay compensation, claiming no agreement existed. The unrepresented seller agreement prevents this dispute before negotiations begin. Compensation agreement. Only, not representation. The form clearly states, the broker represents the buyer only. The broker does not represent the seller. The seller agrees to compensation if a transaction closes with the broker's buyer. This protects the broker's earned commission while maintaining agency integrity. Important teaching point for students. Compensation agreements and agency agreements are separate legal concepts. A broker may receive compensation from a party they do not represent, provided disclosure exists. Buyer agency duties remain intact. Even though the broker communicates directly with the seller, fiduciary duties remain owed exclusively to the buyer, including loyalty, obedience, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting. Because of these duties, information provided by the seller may legally be disclosed to the buyer. Gilbert example. An unrepresented seller tells the buyer's agent they are facing foreclosure pressure. The agent must disclose this material negotiating information to their buyer client. This often surprises FSBO sellers and reinforces why agency disclosure is essential. Seller risk awareness communication transparency. The agreement warns the seller that the broker works for the buyer. Statements made to the broker are not confidential. Negotiation advocacy favors the buyer. The broker still owes all parties. Honest dealing, reasonable skill and care, disclosure of known material defects. However, advocacy belongs solely to the buyer. Protection period and compensation enforcement. Most agreements include a protection period extending beyond expiration. If the seller later sells to the broker's buyer within that time frame, compensation remains owed. This prevents sellers from delaying acceptance simply to avoid paying broker compensation. Phoenix example. A FSBO seller waits until the agreement expires and then accepts the buyer's offer 2 weeks later. The protection clause preserves broker compensation rights. Mediation requirement, dispute resolution. Arizona Realtor R agreements commonly require mediation prior to litigation. This provision encourages resolution without court action, reduces legal expense. Protects professional relationships. Students should recognize mediation clauses as standard risk management tools in Arizona contract drafting. Risk management for Arizona licensees. Always execute this agreement before presenting offers on FSBO properties. Never imply seller representation. Document compensation clearly. Maintain signed copies per ARS, paragraph 32, 2151.01, record retention requirements. Failure to clarify agency and FSBO transactions is a frequent source of commission disputes and ADRA complaints. Course discussions with answers. Discussion question. Why is the unrepresented seller agreement required before submitting an offer on a FSBO property? Answer. To disclose that the broker represents the buyer only and to establish compensation terms with the unrepresented seller. Discussion question. Does signing this agreement create seller representation? Answer. No. The agreement establishes compensation only and confirms buyer agency representation. Discussion question. Can confidential information shared by an unrepresented seller be disclosed to the buyer? Answer. Yes. The broker owes fiduciary duties to the buyer and must disclose material information affecting negotiations.